welcome. We are going to be recording a repeat of the sunflower paint and pour that we did a few weeks ago. We had some technical difficulties with that one. So we wanted to make sure that we did it again so that we would have a recording to post because our recording didn't work out last time. And so we thought we would just offer another session live if anyone wanted to join. But it's really going to be a very, very basic painting that we'll be doing. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of back and forth with anybody. It's mainly just to get the recording. However, if you do have questions for anybody that is joining us, we do have a co-host here today. My name is Colleen, and my co-host today is Erin. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and Erin will take care of that for us. However, Erin, do you want to introduce yourself? I guess I could let you say hi.
Hi, I'm Erin. Usually I would actually always have my video turned on. Today, however, I was in the middle of filming a video recording of our next paint and pour session. So I have my camera off right now.
I feel like it's all paint and pour all the time lately. Which is fine because it's fun. So
yes.
So anyway, so Erin will be keeping in track of the chat and anybody that's joining late or anything along those lines. But feel free to let her know if you have any questions, or if I'm going too fast, I can try to slow down a little bit. But again, this is mainly going to be just a recording for posting later so that other people who are unable to join can watch that on our YouTube later. So I am going to go a little bit faster. It's not going to be as interactive as normal. So don't use this if you've never done a paint and pour with us before. Don't use this as your baseline. This is very much different from our normal ones. Our normal ones are a lot more interactive. So we'll get started. We are again doing a sunflower paint and pour today. I have an 8.5 by 10, 8.5 by 10 canvas that I've got that I'll be working with. This painting, however, would work on any size canvas or canvas board. This is just the one that I happen to have. And I kind of like a smaller one personally. So we are going to get started with our paint for our background, and it's going to be a little loose here. You guys can do whatever color paint you would prefer for your background. The sunflower itself is going to be within the reds and yellows for the flower itself, but if you wanted to use a different contrasting background color, you can do that, or if you want to use something that goes along with that sunflowery color theme, feel free. It's entirely up to you. So I've got my acrylic paint with me here today. I've got some real basic colors. I'm going to be doing a lot of mixing personally for my different shades. I do like to have, the primary colors, the red, blue, yellow, but I also have a green and a black and a white. I feel that the green sometimes can be kind of tricky to make to get the right shade that I'm looking for. So I usually have a green with me, and then black and white, of course, that's lightening and darkening anything that you need to darken or lighten. So I'm actually going to paint my background today in a blue, I think. So I'm going to use one of my larger, wider brushes. You can use any brush you'd like. I used to have a larger brush, but it wore out on me and I have yet to replace it. But I'm going to start honestly with just a plain blue here. And I'm just going to paint the entire background. And I actually kind of want my background to not be a solid background. I did a similar painting not too long ago, and I liked the background being kind of splotchy, especially for this particular painting that we're doing today with the sunflower. Actually, I'm gonna roll up my sleeve so I don't turn my sleeve blue. The sunflower, I kind of like the idea of having a blue and white background so it kind of looks like the sky. So I'm not actually going to fill my background in, but if you want to have a more solid color background, by all means, go right ahead and paint a nice solid color background on yours. I am going to kind of give myself an abstract sky background with my paint here. So that's why I'm doing this the way I'm doing it, but it's entirely up to you. If you want to give it a different sort of feeling to your painting, that's fine. So the original tutorial that I watched to learn about this, it actually does a red background, and it looks really cool, but I really like the contrast of having the blue with the sunflower. So I am going to keep it blue. And when you're painting your backgrounds, you want to make sure, if you don't have a lot of time to do dry time on yours, you want to make sure you're not doing too heavy of a coat of paint on your canvas, because the more paint you put on the canvas, the longer it's going to take to dry, and then the longer it takes for you to finish your painting. So I like my background here. I'm just going to rinse off my brush. I might actually go back after I paint my sunflower. I might go back and add some abstract clouds, do some white in here just to give it a little bit more, I don't know, more interest. But I want to get my sunflower on here first so that I know where that's going to be, and then I can kind of add the white onto the background around that, I think. So I'm not going to give myself a whole lot of dry time on this. I'm not too worried about it. I don't have a super heavy coat, I don't think. And I guess we'll find out if I do or not, because once I move along, if I find that my paint is, I guess, blending in ways that I don't want, then I know I needed to let it dry longer. But that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to actually mix a couple colors on my palette here today, which actually will give me a little bit of dry time on here. So I'm going to push that to the side for a moment. And I want to get some different shades of orange and brown and some sunflowery colors going on. So I'm going to start on that while I am letting the background dry a little bit. So I've got my red, and I'm just going to take some of that and put it on my palette here to mix. And I am going to do the same with some yellow over here. My paint is really slow. It's very thick paint. I'm just going to get my bottle, get that going a little bit better. There we go. So I'm actually going to probably use a lot more yellow than red, because the red is going to be a lot darker, and I don't really need as much of that as I do the yellow. I want to make sure that my yellows and my oranges are nice different shades going. So I am just checking the chat here. No, it looks like we've got nothing going on. Great. So hopefully you guys are all caught up with your background and we're ready to mix. So I am going to kind of just take the red and the yellow here and just give them some mixing together in the middle here. I just want to make sure that my shades are going to give me a lot of variation while I am making my petals for my sunflower, because I'm looking for a kind of blended effect from a darker to a lighter color. So I want to get some orange in there to go along with my reds and yellows. And I am liking the color there. I think I'm going to leave it as is. And then I'm actually going to take a tiny bit of black, a very, very small amount, and just on the outside of this kind of mess that I've made here, I'm going to put a little bit of black. And I'm going to use this to darken. There we go. Just I wish I had instead of a black paper plate, I wish I had a white one so you could see, but I've just got a tiny, tiny amount of black here. And I'm just going to use that to darken some of that orange that I just made. And I'm going to make myself a little brown. So I'm going to use that brown for some detailing. And the fact that I'm mixing it out of the orange that I created is going to make that blend really well with the theme, with the colors that I've already got going on. And I just need a little bit of that for some detailing, so I don't need a whole lot. And make sure that's mixed in nice there. And there we go. So I've got my color palette going. So again, I have some reds, some yellows, a mix between of the orange, and then I added a little bit of black up at the top there to make my brown. So they're all coming from the same color palette together, so they're all going to blend really well, which is nice. And while I was doing that, I did give my background a little bit of time to dry, and I've got a nice abstract sky is what I'm calling it for my background. And now that it's a little bit dry, I'm going to go ahead and kind of decide where on my canvas I want my sunflower to sit. And I'm actually going to take that paintbrush I was just using to mix my colors on my palette, and I'm going to use the handle end of the paintbrush. You could use a pencil or you could use chalk. It's entirely up to you. I personally like to kind of scratch it into my canvas rather than draw, but we are going to sketch out our outline for our sunflower. And we're going to start in the bottom left-hand corner. So when you're looking at your canvas, you want it to start right down in this area. However, if you decide that's not how you're feeling and you want to go somewhere else with it, by all means, go right ahead. I am going to start in my bottom left-hand corner though, and I'm going to go about halfway up to the side here and kind of visualize where that's going to be. And then about a third of the way from the bottom here and visualize where that's going to be. And I'm actually going to draw kind of a semicircle from that corner there. So I've got my starting point up here, and I'm just going to drag my brush through and down. So I'll give you a little close-up of that. So I've just taken my brush handle and just sort of scratched in where I would like my sunflower, the center of my sunflower to sit. So it's as if this were like a quarter of the sunflower. If I had 4 more panels, I could have a whole sunflower, but I just want it right there in that little spot there. And then at that point, I'm going to kind of move on out from that center and start visualizing where I want my petals to go. So I think I'm going to start in the middle here of my semicircle and draw one nice big petal, and I'm going to scratch that in as well. And I'll show you a close-up of that. So once again, I'm just using the handle end of my brush and I'm scratching it into the paint, which is still a little bit wet. So you're going to see a little bit of an outline of where you are going to be painting the other colors. And the reason that I like to use the back of the brush to scratch into that is that if I draw that and I don't like it, it's really, really easy to just go back over with my brush and kind of blend that back in. I don't have to worry about covering anything up because I'm not adding any extra paint. I'm just kind of scratching in an outline, which to me feels a little less permanent, so I feel a little more comfortable doing it. But again, if you feel comfortable using a pencil or some chalk, that's okay too. I personally just really prefer this. So I've got my big petal in the middle, and I'm going to kind of do a couple more of those along the sides. And then behind, in between my 3 larger petals that I've got going on here, I'll give you another close-up of that. I don't know, it's kind of hard to see with the, the glare there, but I've scratched in 3 of my larger main petals, I guess. And then from there, I'm just going to add some background petals just to fill out my sunflower a little bit more. And let's see here. There we go. That looks a little better. All right. So at this point, I have, again, I'm not sure how much of that you can see, but I've scratched in my center of my sunflower here. I've got 3 larger petals kind of on the ends here, and then 1 large one in the middle. And then I scratched in a couple smaller petals to fill it out. And you'll be able to see it a little bit more as I start adding paint. So at this point, I'm going to start with my center, and I'm actually going to do the brown for that. I'm going to get a slightly larger brush here. So I'm going to use just a nice generous brush here to fill in an easy filling in space here. And you can do shades of black, you can do brown, whatever you prefer. You just want a nice dark center for your sunflower, because we are going to then go back over that after the fact with some detailing. So you don't really need it to be one particular color. If you don't want it to be brown, if you don't want it to be black or whatever, that's fine. If your canvas at this point is still a little bit wet, the background, that's okay too. My blue is kind of blending in. It is a little bit wet in that corner still, but that's okay because I'm going to go back over that in a few moments with some details. So you won't really see a whole lot of this background. It's just going to be our base for the inside of our sunflower. So got some brown going on. It's kind of mixing in with my blue, and it's going to give me my center of my sunflower. I just want to make sure that that's nice and solid. Go alongside, touch that up. So I like working with a canvas, a stretched canvas, because I feel like it's easier to manipulate, but then I don't like it because then you've got your messy edges that you have to deal with. So if you want to touch those up, that's fine. I just leave them kind of messy. It just seems like it's too hard to make them all look pretty, and so I just leave it as is. So I've just got my center here painted out with a nice dark base, which we will then let dry as we move on to our petals, because we'll add the detail onto our center in a moment. And like I said, I just did a really like kind of dark blackish brown. It mixed in a little bit with my blue, and that is totally okay because we will go back over that. It doesn't really have to look like the middle of a sunflower quite yet. So don't worry if yours did something similar. So at this point, I'm going to start outlining with my petals. And I will be using my reds and oranges and yellows that I've made here on my palette. I'm going to start with my red. I want to outline the petals in this red because I want to give it a little bit more of a distinct line. And that way I know where I'm going in each individual petal when I fill that in. So I don't need a whole lot of paint on my brush. I'm using a smaller rounded tip brush, but you can use a flat tip brush if you prefer. It's whatever works best for you, whatever you feel most comfortable manipulating, and move your canvas around as you need to. It's whatever is comfortable for you. And I'm just going to start over here, and I'm just putting that red right over that scratch that I made in my canvas. And I don't need it to be super dark with my red because we are going to do a lot of blending with this particular piece. I just want to visualize a little bit more where my petals will go individually, and I want it to end up with a little bit of an outline after I've done my blending. So I do want to get that outline on there to start. And I like the look of the darker red, and then once I get my petals blended in, how that looks once they're mixed. So that going. I really like painting petals on flowers. I think for whatever reason, just the swoopiness of it is really satisfying. I like all my painting terms. Erin, are you paying attention to this? I can't remember what my last painting term was when we did the Aurora Borealis. What was I calling them last time? I don't even remember. But I come up with these ridiculous terms that are not in any way technical. I am not a professional painter, if you hadn't noticed. I'm just doing this for fun. But I always feel like I come up with some sort of crazy terminology for my technical moves that I'm making here. So my petals are swoopy, I guess, swoopiness. So go ahead and add those little petals in the back there. So again, this is very, very, very basic outline. So I've just got my individual petals. I've got my 5 petals outlined just so that I can see, I get the glare out of the way there, just so I can see where I'm going to come back in with my shading, so that I have some good, I think, ombre effect sort of is what you call it. So I am going to move on to one of my larger brushes. Actually, I go back to this one, just make sure it's nice and clean. So I'm going to start filling in my petals at this point, and I'm going to start with the darkest color. So I'm going to go back to my reds here, but I'm going to get a little bit of orange in there, not a whole lot, but I'm just going to start closest to my center of my sunflower here with my darkest color, and I'm going to just sort of paint outwards from that. And I want my brush strokes to be in one direction because I want that to be the movement of my petal. So I'm just going to give you a quick glance at how I'm doing that. So I'm taking my brush from the very middle here and just going out towards the tip of the petal. I'm not blending yet. I just want to get a base down there, but I personally want that that brush stroke to show a little bit because I want that to be part of my petal. And I'm going to do that for all 3 of my really big petals that I've got. And I will go back and touch up in between a little bit here, but I'm going to do that with a slightly different color to give some contrast. So, and when you're doing the petals, you can put a good deal of paint on your canvas there because we are going to be doing some blending. So you do want a little bit of paint to work with. You don't want it to dry too quickly. So feel free to get a little heavier handed with that, I guess. So now I've got my 3 big petals. I'm going to go back to my palette and I'm going to move more towards the oranges because I want to give some contrast to those petals in between here. And I'm going to do those in an orange. So you'll get a little bit of contrast between those. And you could swap the colors if you wanted to do the petals that are forward in a darker color, that's okay. Or that are forward in a lighter color, opposite of what I've done, that's okay. If you want to stick with what I'm doing, that's fine too. So, and that's why these outlines are going to help me see where I'm going, because we're going to get pretty muddled with these colors being so similar. So I want to make sure I know the distinction between where each petal is as I end up blending out. So I'm keeping with that same motion, but I am switching the colors up a little bit. So I'll give you a view here, and it still doesn't look like a whole lot, but it's starting to look a little bit more like a sunflower. So I've got my 3 main petals here in that darker red, and then in between I've added that orange color, and then I'm actually going to continue with that orange color, and I'm going to start blending out the larger petals. So again, I'm taking the orange and I'm going to start adding that to my large petal. And you can get kind of messy with it because this is where we'll go back. And once we've added the orange in the spots that we want, we can start moving back and forth with our brush. You want to keep that same motion going, but you can go kind of back and forth because we want to blend. We don't want a harsh line. Like I've got a harsh line right there. We do want to blend that in a little bit more. So we will be able to go back over once we've put our color on the palette or on the canvas here. We will go back over that and blend that out so it's nice and subtle transitions. So I'll get the orange on all 3 petals. Make sure I'm not getting my hair into my canvas here. And all right, so now I'm going to just take the brush. I'm not going to add any more paint. I'm going to take the brush and just kind of, with that same motion, blend that darker red into the orange and pull that forward a little bit more. Just so it's blended out, it's not quite as harsh of a line. Want that to mix in really nicely. And you'll start seeing as you go along a little bit more of a transition between your 2 colors. I'm just gonna turn. And if you feel like yours aren't blending the way you wanted, or if it's not quite the color you were hoping for, you can always go back over and add more red. So I'll add some more red in here just so that you can see, maybe keep that darker color towards the bottom a little bit more visible if you prefer, and blend that in. And you can just keep on doing that with each individual petal. And you'll pull that up, and if you feel, I put a little bit too much red on that one actually, so there we go. You'll just pull that up through to towards the tip of the petal. And don't worry too much if you feel like your lines are really visible, because we will continue to layer. We've got lots of layers going on today. So I'm feeling pretty good about those. I'm going to move on to my next color, which is going to be, so I started with my red, I moved into my orange, and now I'm skipping over the middle orange here because I use that a lot. And I'm actually going to go into the other side that's touching the yellow because I want some of that lighter orange to work with. And I'm going to use that on my smaller petals here in the background. I actually want a little bit lighter even. There we go. And again, I am just adding paint to those petals at this point. I've not blended them quite yet. I just want to get that color on there. And then I can go back and blend that out. All right. So I've got my second color added to my middle petals here, and I'm going to take the same brush again and just go ahead and blend that out. This gets a little bit trickier though, because I've got the larger petals are the ones that are on the outside, and then the smaller petals are kind of on the inside, underside of the canvas layering here. So it's kind of tricky to get those lines. But if it looks a little weird after you've done your blending, you can always go back and touch that back up again. And what I like about the red outline that I've done is as I go through, it kind of blends into the petals themselves as well. And those out. And then I'm going to go back to my palette again, and I'm going to use an even brighter yellow just for the little tiny tips here, just a little bit, brighten it up and blend that one out as well. Get my hair out of my paint again. I should really learn to pull my hair up in a ponytail or something. And oops, see, I've changed my swoop there a little bit. That's okay. All right, so now I'm going to go back to my larger petals one more time with that same idea of the brighter yellow at the top. Get some paint on there for each of my petals. And once again, go ahead and blend that in. And if you want to go really far down, honestly, you could just start from the bottom and just kind of blend all the way up. It's up to you, however you want to do that. I'm going to do that in the middle one, just to see how it looks. And I really kind of like that. I'm going to continue that. I really like the streaks there personally. It's a new technique I've not done before. There we go. So I've got my streaks going on there. Make sure I can see my individual petal outlines, kind of pull my brush through there again if I need to. So I'm going to go back, and now that I've got all of my colors kind of filled in on my sunflower here, I'm going to go back and do some more outlines again. You could go with back to the red, which we originally started with, or you could do a lighter color, or you could do a combination. It's entirely up to you. I just want to touch up a couple of the spots that I feel like need a little bit more distinct lines, just to give it a little more detail. Not too much. All right. My brush is cleaned there. Keep my paint, hair out of my paint. Nope. There we go. All right. So at this point, we're going to let our petals dry a little bit, and we're going to move back into the center here. We're going to continue again with the same palette that we've got going on here in colors, but if you want to add a little bit more black, if you need to darken up some of your colors again, go ahead and add a little bit more black to that palette. We are pretty much going to take, I'm just using the same brush that I was using earlier for my brown. We're going to take all of these and just create some sunflower seeds essentially. So I'm just going to start with a slightly lighter brown by mixing, again, I'm just using my leftover paint from my petals. I'm just mixing those with a little bit of black, and I'm just going to use this to start adding dots. And it doesn't have to look like real sunflower seeds. That's okay. We're going for kind of an abstract thing, but I'm actually going to start, I'm going to darken that up a little bit. Actually, I want to start with a slightly darker color, similar to how we did our petals. And I'm going to start towards the corner here, and I'm going to move outwards. So I'm going to start by just adding dots in. It doesn't have to look pretty. You're just going to take your brush and just kind of pop up and down and move towards your center of your canvas. And the brush that I have is actually almost like the perfect brush for making this shape of a sunflower seed. So I just take it, I don't even pull or anything, I just push down and pull up. And I've got it at a little bit of an angle. And I'm going to lighten my color as I go to get that shaded effect again. You can go ahead and overlap with those colors a little bit to blend that out, so it's not too harsh of a line too on that one. And it ends up being a really simple way to give that detail to that middle part of your canvas here, or of your sunflower, excuse me. So again, this is just an up and down motion that I'm using with my brush. I'm not pulling the brush at all. I'm just tapping on the canvas and moving outward as I tap. So I have that motion kind of going. And if you want to really blend that in and do lots of layers, you can get really, really layery with that. That's entirely up to you. I'm going to leave it as is. I like the abstract kind of look I've got going on. I feel like it gives a lot of motion to my sunflower, which I guess, I don't know how much do sunflowers move around? I'm not really sure. So at this point, I've got my sunflower. Still has a lot of good wet paint on there, so I'm going to let it dry a little bit more, and I'm going to start adding into my background. So if you wanted to put some clouds, you could. If you want to just add some streaks of color, whatever you want to do. I feel like I'm a little bit disappointed in how dark my blue dried, so I'm actually going to use some white to kind of lighten that up a little bit. And I'm going to take my flat brush here, and I'm going to just barely, I'm going to get some white paint on my brush, and I'm just going to, that one out of the way, use my palette to kind of get most of that paint off. I don't want a lot of paint on my brush for this. I just want a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of go through and add some streaks in through my background to lighten it back up again, because I didn't want as much of that blue to show as I have going on here. So I'm just going in with the same motion that I was when I was painting the blue onto the canvas, and it's almost like I'm erasing the blue. And that's exactly what I'm going for. I just want to kind of give, I like this whole idea of motion. So I'm going to give some motion to my canvas, to the background here, by just taking away some of that blue. Just a tiny little bit, don't need a whole lot. And that just lightens it up a little bit for me. I think it looks kind of like windy clouds. And that's kind of what I'm going for. So as you can see, I did not do a whole lot. I just a tiny bit, just dragged my brush with a smidge of white across the canvas, just to give it a little bit of a lighter color to it. So I'm gonna clean off my hand. I just stuck it in the paint and I don't want to get that on my canvas. All right, so your petals are probably still gonna be pretty wet, but that's okay. We do want them to be a little bit wet. We don't want them totally dry, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna blend in some accent colors. So Last time that I did this, I ended up doing some green as an accent color. If you wanted to go in with a white, or if you want to do a green, you can go ahead and do that. I'm going to stick with the green because it ended up looking really kind of interesting, I think. So I'm just going to take a little bit of green to my palette here, and I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. So I want a little bit of white still on my palette. There we go. And it's just this very small amount. I don't need a whole lot. I'm just going to mix those two to go together to do a lighter green. I think that the green is a nice contrast with the orange and the yellow, that it adds some interest without being too much personally. I actually am going to make that just a tiny bit darker. Got some really thick paint today, so. There we go. And if you wanted, I guess you could kind of do like a teal almost and add some blue in there. I just don't want like a forest green. I want it a little bit brighter than that. There we go. So I'm going to take one of my, actually, you know what? I'm going to use the brush that I was just using with the white, because I like that it's a flathead brush. And I'm going to use that, and I'm just going to do some little swoops, some streaks in my petals here, and it can go wherever you want. It's just going to be little tiny accents, and it adds a whole lot of dimension, I think. Oh, see, I did get hair in my canvas. And I'm just making these motions the same direction as my brush strokes from earlier. I want to keep with that same movement. So go ahead and do a couple more here. And it's just such a tiny little detail that adds so much because of the difference in the color, I think. So I really liked it. So that's it. That's all I'm going to do with my petals there. I've just added those little tiny streaks of green in. I am personally feeling pretty good about this. I feel like I've got a pretty good painting. I don't want to go any further with it at this point, I don't think. But if you wanted to go back and really outline your petals, you could go ahead and do that. If you wanted to add some of the green into the middle of your sunflower at this point, just for some really extra big pops, or in the background, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to leave it as is, but you can really go kind of crazy with it. You can do a totally different color background. Again, I did blue. I like the idea of it being kind of like a sky. You could go really crazy with your center of your sunflower with the layers. You can just keep, honestly, if you wanted to wait for this to dry and go back over it again with more, you could add some really great texture. Putting more layers of paint, especially if you're using an acrylic paint, it will actually end up building up, and you do get some cool texture going on. So that's always an option. It's really, it's up to the artist. It's up to you. But I'm feeling pretty good about this, so I'm going to call it a day for this one. This is my sunflower. It's going to be up on our YouTube very shortly if you are here live. Thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for a more regular paint and pour. This is a little bit of a condensed version again. We just wanted to get a recording going up on to our YouTube since we had some trouble with the last recording. So it was pretty fast, but we will be doing plenty more paint and pours in the future, and they will be the full program. You won't have to sit through a really condensed one. Erin, in fact, my co-host today, is filming her paint and pour for her next session next week, I think. Oh my gosh, is it next week, Erin? I think it is. So she's got a really cool paint and pour coming up. It's going to be a day and night tree. So you'll be splitting your canvas in half and almost doing two paintings. With some really cool techniques that she'll tell you all about. You will need some paintbrushes, but you'll also need a few other extra tools. And of course, if you are signed up for that, or if you want to sign up for that, this is one of our regular paint and pour programs. We do provide a take and make kit for those. So you will be able to pick up that kit at the library at main library, at the branch, at North or South branch, whatever one is easiest for you. So we will provide the materials for the upcoming paint and pour. I'll see, unless Erin is back on her mic, if she can tell me. If not, I will check and see if I can pull up the date real quick here on my computer. Let's see. So while I'm doing that, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to go over? Any of the details? Do you feel like we went pretty quickly with this? Were you able to follow along? I don't know. I've done this painting a few times actually at this point, so I can move pretty quickly through it. Normally when we do our paint and pours though, we are painting kind of for the first time with you. So we are all sort of on the same starting point and learning together. Today was a little different because, like I said, I had to redo this a couple times. Yes, it is next week. Oh my gosh, this is coming up so fast. So on Wednesday, September 16th at 7 p.m., we have our day and night tree. And oh, it looks like it's full, unfortunately, already. So registration is full at this point, but if there is room on the wait list, you can always add yourself to the wait list. And we do have the extra kits that we will give out afterwards. So if you are hoping to join us, keep your eye out for that. If you can't make it for the next one, we are doing these once a month. So our regular schedule will be the second Wednesday of every month will be our regular paint and pour program. So we've got the day and night tree on the 16th of September. In October, I will be doing a spooky painting on the 14th, I believe. Let's see here. Is it the 14th or is it the 21st? Nope, I'm sorry. It's the 21st.
Yeah, I think it's the third Wednesday.
The third Wednesday. I misspoke. Yep. So paint and pour, dark arts. And we'll be doing a spooky painting. I don't want to give too much away though. It's not going to be scary. It's definitely all age friendly, but it's going to be kind of an homage to the season, I guess. And that will be opening for registration soon. So there's still time for that. And then in November, on the third Wednesday at 7 p.m., which is the 18th, we have our floating fall leaf, which will be Erin. And then our last but not least for the year, paint and pour on the third Wednesday in December will be December 16th. It will be our Winter Wonderland painting. And that will actually be myself. I'll be hosting, but I will have a special co-host with me. So we might have 3 of us here that you can watch paint and see who does what differently. I'm not sure. I think Erin will join us, but then we'll also have one of our former PopMat librarians, Celia, will be joining us. And that'll be a really fun one because we're going to do some interesting techniques with that one too. I don't know if we're going to use a single paintbrush with that one, actually.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
It's a really interesting one. So we're going to try to do a lot of variation in our painting programs. We don't want it to just be a new theme every month. We want to learn new techniques every month. So we're going to keep trying on those. And I'm super excited for all of the delicious hot cocos and the pumpkin punch and all the fun drinks that we've got going on. So please, once again, keep your eye out for those. If you have any questions or if you have any trouble signing up for anything, please let us know. We're more than happy to help. Again, my name is Colleen. Erin was our co-host today, but you can ask anybody at the library if you have any issues. And hopefully we'll see you next week. I'm not sure if any of you here today are signed up, but hopefully we'll see you next week for our day and night tree. And for those of you who were joining us for this live rushed painting, thank you so much. You can go ahead and review it up on our YouTube very shortly within the next day or so, I hope. So hopefully we'll see you again soon. And thank you all for joining. Oh, all right.
Yay!
So it was really weird doing it without actually like interacting. I felt like I was going a million miles a minute, but
No, it was good.
But I like my painting. I'm gonna have a whole collection of sunflowers.
I like it too.
I know it's so simple, but it ends up looking really cool after everything. I don't
If
know.
I wouldn't have had to make this video, I would be making that at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I've got multiples if you would like one.
I know, right? I'm just gonna.
But I actually think I
one.
like this one better than my first one.
I like that too. Good.
Yeah, it's nice. So
Mhm.
now I have to wait for it to dry.
Yep.
Figure out where I can hang all of my paintings. I think I'm just gonna start hanging them on the wall of my office.
You should.
Collecting all of my paintings.
That's cool. I like that idea.